Hello, everyone. I'm John Cross, and welcome to the January 6th episode of the LGS Pod. With me tonight, as always, is our co-host, Dylan Wilson. Dylan, how are you doing here on our first episode of 2026, the start of our season 2 for the LGS Pod?
I'm doing well. It's good to be back. Had a nice kind of relaxing, chill holiday and a surprisingly easy return to work. Not as many
Good.
emails as I thought. Yeah, so that's always nice. Yeah, so generally doing well. I did get a parking ticket over the holiday that I'm
Oh,
pretty annoyed
no.
about, but I contested it and it's still pending after, like, normally, they tell you like, oh, you'll receive a decision in like 7 to 10 days. It's been like 2 weeks. Granted, it's over the holidays, so we'll see. But fingers crossed, that means they're like considering it, But other than that, yeah, doing pretty well. It's good to be back. How about yourself?
Your parking ticket reminded me of a story. I've only received one parking ticket in my entire life. Technically, it was three days in a row because I parked somewhere. And it was when I was at school at San Diego State. And where I lived in the dorms, there were 3 dorms together, and they were right next. One of the dorm parking lots was right next to the baseball field. Well, I got home very late at night, I don't know, on a Sunday or something, coming back for the weekend, and I parked in this spot. And I didn't realize it was the coach. It was Jim Dietz, the coach of the baseball team, the head coach. It was his spot, his personal spot. It was marked, but I didn't see
Nice.
it in the dark. And like after the third day, when everybody had to pass by that area, like coming back from the dorms or something. I never pay attention to my car, but someone finally stopped me and said, "Hey, you got like 3 tickets on your on your car." And then I found out they were trying to figure out who had parked in the head coach's spot. So that was my I guess technically 3 parking tickets that I ever had because I just parked it and left it.
Fair enough.
So happy I found a space.
Yeah.
Right? Didn't know
Why
it was
even think
reserved for the
twice?
head coach. Yeah. So that's I guess I've been fortunate in that sense, but that was always a funny story to tell. I'm sure the head coach was none too happy that his space was taken, not just for one day, but for 3 days. Can't imagine I was the first one though. That
No,
one thing squeezed in the middle of a dorm parking lot. Anyway, my break went very well in terms of like family and everything else. It was great, and as you said, a relaxing break on that end. But on this kind of stuff, it was a very productive break. It was part of taking the couple of weeks off. For me, it's a good time to reset and look ahead at what's coming up for the next year and what some of our plans are. And that's kind of with all that said, we have a big announcement to make, and it's going to be the big focus of our episode tonight. And this is about the San Diego Soccer History Society. So I don't want to give too much away. We'll talk about it in a few minutes, but we'll do that in the second half of the episode, like we always do for our main topics. And we'll, to start off, recap some of the news. And of course, there's been a lot of news since we've been away for a couple of weeks. So we'll just hit a couple of things.
There's a lot of news,
first,
even if you're just talking soccer.
Yeah. So I was just talking soccer.
I figured.
I'm gonna try as much as possible to avoid the other news of the world, at least for the moment. But we'll start off like we usually do with a little, we'll say San Diego history. It's not soccer specific, but it does deal specifically with a venue. And on this day, January 6, 1981, the San Diego City Council voted to rename the then San Diego Stadium to Jack Murphy Stadium in honor of the legendary sports writer who worked at the San Diego Union. This was, for those who are not as old as I am, this was before the Union and the Tribune merged together. So he wrote for the morning paper, the San Diego Union, instrumental in helping get the Chargers to leave LA, in the AFL to come to San Diego after that first year. Instrumental in his writing and campaigning to get the Padres, get a professional baseball team here in San Diego, and hugely instrumental in getting that stadium built. in his lobbying and his articles that he wrote. He was, I don't know how many people know this. He was quite young when he died. I think this was a bit of the surprise. Also, he's 57, died from lung cancer. Some people may be familiar because I think it's over in front of Snapdragon now. The statue with him and his dog Abe. But he was, again, prominent sports writer and very influential in the birth of what we consider now, like the professional sports and a professional stadium, and died at a relatively young age. And shortly after, he died in September of 1980, and then they named the stadium after him in January of 1981. And it stayed Jack Murphy Stadium until 1997 when it became Qualcomm. And that was met with a lot of pushback in the community because they then, what they did was, it was Qualcomm Stadium. They had the naming rights, but it was Jack Murphy Field, and one of the things though with the naming rights through Qualcomm and the contract is you couldn't ever say Jack Murphy in the same time with Qualcomm. Like they couldn't be put together. You couldn't say Jack Murphy Field at Qualcomm Stadium, in any of the official publications. So for years and years, I was one of those people. It took forever to call it Qualcomm.
Well, now it wasn't Qualcomm when it was demolished.
Yeah, and when it was demolished, it was actually, well, it was Snapdragon at one point.
No, it was SDCCU.
Well, and then it went to
Union
SDCCU, but it was actually Snapdragon for a very brief period of time, because then there was some kind of, if I remember correctly, a little bit of a court case or something saying that like, hey, the contract is this, you can't just change it, because it was their brand new processor. So Qualcomm wanted, like to highlight Snapdragon, and a lot of people were upset, like you can't just go and then change the name. So
and
that was kind of the end of Qualcomm, and then it went to the SDCCU when it was actually I don't know if that was it when it was demolished. Was it like Aztec Stadium?
I thought it was SDCCU Stadium, but there was some legal functionality such that it wasn't officially their sponsorship when it was demolished. I totally lost my train of thought. I was going to say something. Don't worry about it. It wasn't. It was just some snide remarks, so it wasn't worth it.
Well, a fun fact that I found out when I was just digging a little bit for this that I'd never heard before, according to Wikipedia. So I didn't verify this anywhere else, but it was listed in there that Jack Murphy was actually the third cousin of Warren Buffett.
It doesn't. I mean, like that is interesting, but also. Doesn't Warren Buffett have like 1 million brothers and sisters, or like a bunch of children or something like that?
I have no idea.
I feel like it's like that's interesting, but also probably statistically more likely than you might guess.
Yeah, once you start getting out to third and fourth cousins and things. So.
Well, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? It's right. Anybody on Earth.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, well that's our history for today. So a little throwback. So again, January 6th. So with all the other stuff that's going on and people celebrating anniversaries of things happening on January 6th, here's a local one that you can hang your hat on when you get tired of hearing about the other stuff. That January 6th was when San Diego Stadium was renamed Jack Murphy Stadium. All right, let's move ahead to some current events and such, because we're at the time of year where a lot of leagues are on or going into or just finished some of their breaks. I mean, some leagues don't take breaks really at all. And here in the US, we certainly have our lower leagues, and well, not just the lower leagues, everyone except for, well, I guess even the USL Super League right now is even on their break. Pretty much everybody's on a break at the moment, unless they're playing arena soccer.
I think they are, but whatever, different.
Yeah, and it's we have all kinds of changes going on. One of the things I wanted to just bring up for conversation with you here is get your thoughts on the Chelsea Strasbourg situation and part of these multi-club ownerships, and the RC Strasbourg's coach going to become the new Chelsea coach. And I don't know if you saw it, the
I did, yeah.
Strasbourg supporter group uh, had a, you know, didn't really hold back in their comment about this. So, and again, for anybody who hasn't seen it, who's listening, basically, they don't want to be, and along with all the other comments that are out there, that the joke that a lot of people have of the French leagues being a farmers league anyway. But like, here's an example of, in the American sense, a true farm team, right? It
Yeah.
is, Strasbourg has become the farm team for Chelsea. And
In a very
I just
literal
want to get
sense. Yeah.
your general thoughts on this.
Well, it's interesting. French football, I think, has unfortunately, this isn't the first time that a notable French club has succumbed to this. Yeah, I don't know. One of my best friends is a Chelsea fan, but he's kind of like he's a very smart guy, but when it comes to talking Chelsea, he just like it's not the logic goes out the window, so it's a little hard. But um I generally am not a fan of the multi-club model, but the way Chelsea does it is so shameless. It's very literally an American model, an American approach.
Yeah, right.
And I say literally because it is literally, a consortium of mainly
And
Americans.
Blueco.
Um, right, Blueco, who also have a hand in owning or primarily own the Dodgers. But in the context of baseball, right, that's a structure that exists before them. They're kind of importing that baseball structure into European soccer, but it's at the detriment of these real clubs. Whereas a lot of the current minor league clubs in baseball, to continue with that allegory, or that comparison, uh, didn't exist as independent clubs prior to their existence as a minor league club. Some of them did, and like, don't get me wrong, there's a whole historical debate to be had there, but by and large, most of them have always existed as minor league clubs, right? This is not true for a club like RC Strasbourg, and especially when you consider Strasbourg as a city historically in the Alsace region. I mean, is a richly local identity like spot. And I think a lot of people probably underestimate how much regional identity plays a factor in France outside of Paris. Like, people really just think about Paris when they think of France, but northwestern France and northeastern France and southeastern France and southwestern France might as well be four different countries. They're culturally so different. And so a place like Strasbourg, again, in the Alsace region, which has, traded hands several times over the last century or century and a half, there's a very strong local identity there. So it's not the same as any minor league club when a club like Strasbourg gets consumed into a structure like this. And I say that to kind of, and I start with that whole caveat, I guess is the wrong word, but start with that whole sidebar to kind of preempt what I think a lot of people would argue. That's like, oh, well, you look at these minor league clubs and it's like, they might be minor league clubs, but like, it's good for the local sporting culture, whatever. And I actually think that's true in a lot of cities with minor league clubs. But my point is that it's just so different. It's not even apples to oranges. It's like apples to like fucking nuclear bombs. It's just not a comparable thing. They're not even in the same universe. And so it's too, first and foremost, I think it's really, I feel for the Strasbourg fans. And I think it's especially tough because I know that the supporters group who you referenced, having put out that statement, which I actually haven't seen, but I think I can imagine probably what they said. They've been saying this all along since Blueco even proposed taking over, that like this is where this was headed. And a lot of the other more casual fans in the city of Strasbourg, from what I've read, kind of wrote them off as dramatic and like alarmist, which, unfortunately, I can relate to that, but that's on a whole different tangent. So it's really tragic, and I think it's especially tragic too because all of this is not going to be to the benefit of Chelsea insofar as them winning things, because I think a lot of people will push back on this, but I think the era of Chelsea being a dominant team who wins things a lot is like nearing being over, because the owners now are not concerned with winning anything. They are treating players as tradable assets. Enzo Maresca was apparently let go because he didn't want to deal with all the pressure from the agents saying my player needs to play to be in the shop window, and the club agreeing with the agents over the manager. That's one report, but I'm, inclined to believe there's some truth to that. Anyway, I'm going off in a lot of different directions here. I was trying to bring this all into a more coherent point, but really, I think what it is to say is that the multi-club model is bad, but this is worse because this is like a shameless treating of a very historic club and identity as a feeder. And like obviously that's always happened, but like the shamelessness with which it's happened. Chelsea buy players and somehow they end up being Strasbourg players, right? Like it's silly. And Manchester City, the City Group, has done some silliness with this kind of thing as well, but it didn't feel this blatant, I guess, this naked. Like maybe I just wasn't paying close enough attention, but um, yeah, I really think that I really feel for the Strasbourg fans, but I also think that Chelsea fans need to be careful because just because they're the A team in this structure doesn't mean it's like a good structure that's going to be good for them, right? They can parasitize, or that's not the correct way to say that. But you know what I'm trying to say. They can be parasitic to their own
Right.
structure by taking the best players from Strasbourg, Liam Senior. I'm sure there will be other clubs in the system at some point, but you know it's not the same as baseball. Those systems are not set up to replenish every year the same way that they are with baseball, right? They don't have a draft. They don't have like the rule 5 or whatever it is where you get replacement players when you lose a free agent, things like that. Like there aren't those natural mechanisms to replenish these farm structures, and it's going to bleed them dry at some point. And so I think at least two clubs, Chelsea and Strasbourg, but probably more, will have suffered for it at the end of all this. And I want to say too that to link it back to a conversation I think we've had on this podcast before. And I'm sorry, I know I'm going way off tangent here, but I remember a conversation I had with somebody about a club in the City Group who's also in France, Troyes, which is Troyes. It's spelled, but Troyes is how they say it because France. I don't know, whatever. It's like a suburb of Paris. They were bought out by the City Group like 10, 15 years ago. And I remember I was talking with somebody and they were saying like, oh, well, there's not that many fans anymore at Troyes games. And I was like, well, why do you think that is? They're like, oh, I don't know. 10 years ago, it was, triple the attendance. And you look what happened 10 years ago. Troyes was at that point was taken over by
Right.
the City Group. And it's like, well, no fucking shit that nobody cares anymore because you've just turned it into this feeder club. And it's going to happen with Strasbourg too, especially with how cynical this Rosenior thing is. Which, by the way, I actually really like Liam Rosenior. I think he's a very good manager. He was super hard done by at Hull City. And I think it's too bad he got involved in this structure because I think he's a talented and smart young manager. Sorry,
And I'm
that
sure
was
the
way longer than I
Strasbourg
meant. Yeah.
supporters
Yeah.
are think he's good too. They don't want to see him
Oh, he's
go.
been excellent for them. I mean, they're top 5 in France, and then they're if they were allowed to finish out the season, I would expect them to run away with the Conference League. So that would effectively give Chelsea a second in a row there, which would I don't know, be kind of funny, I guess, in a really cynical way. Anyway, that went way longer than I intended. I apologize for that. But I had a lot of kind of disparate thoughts there. I was trying to
Yeah,
tangle together.
it leads to a lot of conversations, especially about the multi-club model. And one of the things I fear for, to say, a club that's very close to us, SDFC, and Right to Dream, where on the one hand, I love some of the stuff that Right to Dream does in terms of players and how they treat their players in their academy system. But Right to Dream is really the primary owner of SDFC, and because that's Mansour, and they own several clubs. And
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what Northland thinks now that some players going on loan to Northland and coming back to SDFC, and other players coming from Northland to SDFC. And it was always told when I was involved in stuff and being that SDFC is like the top club in their group, and
And that's
no one
probably
no one
true
said it,
currently.
but like everything would be funneled through. But exactly, currently, what
Right.
happens if all this is successful for this group and then they decide to land a team somewhere else that is in a league that is considered better than MLS, higher profile, whatever else, SDFC could very well become the Strasbourg of Right to Dream.
Just with a lot
And
less like history, but whatever. I
and
digress.
again, I don't think that's anything people want to hear. But when you are part of a multi-club ownership group, that is always a possibility. And I agree with you. I think multi-club ownership groups are something that really need to be, well, I would say need to be banned. But I think if a country like ours, I don't know if you could legally do that. Like the way our laws and stuff are set up, that you could ban someone from owning multiple teams.
Well, it would have to be a FIFA thing, and FIFA's just never going to fucking do that. So,
Well, not right now. I mean, and this is a perfect segue to well, I'm going to skip one. We'll save one for next time that we were going to have, but we'll segue over into the World Sports Summit that happened at Dubai while we were on break, which again, insane amount of sports washing, sane washing. I mean, whatever you want to call it, but the amount of well, ultimately oil money, but coming in and just being a part of the game. I mean, we had FIFA basically signing a sponsorship deal, or really kind of giving away the FIFA awards that we just had about, the top players and all the things that FIFA does awards, but signing them over to the Dubai Sports Council to now take over the awards. And who knows, we'll find out next year what's going to happen with those. But again, that basically signing over a memorandum of understanding that they will be the big sponsor for this. And you always have sponsorships, but feels like with FIFA, all our sponsorships and everything else are going to this, um, well, huge sums of money are becoming involved in my opinion, corrupting the game. And then you also at the same conference have Jessica Berman, the, newly inked another 3-year term of NWSL commissioner, out there on a panel discussion. I don't know if you saw any clips from that, but
I've seen quotes. I haven't seen clips, but
they're just talking about how to get young people involved in the sport. And her answers, just to be brief and not rehash everything she said, were basically around all kinds of things that have nothing to do with the actual sport. It's like someone who has no confidence in the sport that she governs as commissioner. I guess not governs, probably not the right word, but leads as commissioner, as the spokesperson. No faith that the sport itself and the communities that are already built around the game will be able to sustain it. We have to find ways. In short, one of her big things was how to get more young people involved in what are effectively gambling sites, to get them hooked. Use that as the hook to get them involved in the game.
And I think too that and this could open a much larger discussion, so I won't opine on it too long like I did the whole Chelsea Strasbourg question. But the whole framing of that is just so fucking like NBA that it's just, of course, you're going to lead to an answer like, well, gambling websites. Like, the framing of how do we get young people interested in watching our sport? Like, be interesting, and the people who want to watch it will watch it. Pay your players.
Right.
Cough, cough. People will watch it. But this whole well, how do we get young people interested? It almost presumes that the answer can't be the sport is interesting. It has to be some fucking thing that somebody in a boardroom comes up with. I don't know. I have a thing against MBAs and their ilk, so I'm not, whatever. I'm biased, but end of rant.
All right. Well, sticking with the NWSL, they did create their high impact player rule, which effectively allows teams to spend an extra $1 million rather than do what the Players Association said, is just raise the salary cap by $1 million. But we clearly have we have this happening at NWSL. We have the collective bargaining agreement situation going on in the USL. We have all of these things happening here in the off season. All the AGMs for the different leagues are coming up, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of movement and a lot of changes over the next few weeks that we'll follow and talk about. In fact, over the last week, I heard there was an offer put up by the League of Clubs for the NPSL to merge, which they offered last year when they broke away, all those clubs as well. And the NPSL shut them down. And it looks like through some leaked documents I saw today that were posted by Chris Kessel, it looks like the NPSL is shunning that merger again. So that's another league here locally to see what happens, because as a lot of people are thinking, if they fall under 50 teams, because they were more than 100, and then the League for Clubs siphoned a bunch of teams away. NPSL has already lost some more teams to the League for Clubs and to USL2. If they fall below 50 clubs, they may like totally unravel really fast. And I think we are in a situation right now between, especially on the men's side, all our different leagues and what's happening and positioning with all those leagues, that we are likely to see some big casualties from the soccer wars in terms of leagues. But we have enough teams, and teams that are, I would say, decently run, lower league, amateur, semi-pro type teams, that people could quickly shuffle around into another league. So I think these next couple of years, we might see a huge shakeup in lower league soccer on the men's side in this country.
Yeah, it does. I wanted to say too, I did see that it sounds like the USL might be approaching an agreement on the
I
CBA.
did, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I got distracted for a second there, so I'm sorry if you mentioned that already.
I, I did not, but I'll just jump in quickly that
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
two things. I saw an interview with one of the representatives for the Players Association for USL, and said they're still very far apart on some things. But I did see something else. I think it was over at ESPN article, maybe Jeff Carlisle, that I think on Thursday they're supposed to be meeting, and they might be getting closer on a couple of things, which again, there's a little time before the season starts. Yes, the CBA ran out on the 31st of December, but like most union management situations, as long as people are still talking, I mean, there's three options, right? The players go on strike, the owners lock them out, or you keep trying to bargain in good faith and you just kind of keep the old contract in place until you can negotiate something else. And that seems where they are right now. Could that change? Certainly. We'll see. They have till first week in March, I think it is, when the season's supposed to start. I think for the championship, actually for both leagues, I think championship and League One start up. But in along this, I also saw there was an article in FC Business that was really kind of a glowing article on the prospect and possibility of USL and moving forward with the first division and promotion relegations. So, all exciting stuff to hear, assuming they can work out their collective bargaining situations and actually treat their players like the professionals they are.
Yeah, that last sentence right there, I think, really captures pretty much the essence of everything wrong with the current landscape of the athlete experience at the top level of soccer in the United States, right? To me, I mean, don't get me wrong, I understand like capitalism at a fundamental level, but sports specifically, it is mind blowing to me that somehow the athletes have gotten screwed into not making the money here when like they are the entire thing. And again, I understand there are larger systems at play here, but it just seems really fucking backwards when you put it like that, you know?
And I think what gets lost in a lot of conversations about this is what really makes the news are your again, when we talk about just the rest of the population, we talk about the 1%, like you're talking about the 1% athletes, your ultra top athletes that are getting the richest, largest
Right.
contracts that some people roll their, like, whoever needs that amount of money. And that's a whole separate conversation you can have. But on the other end of that scale, and it's not an evenly balanced scale. You've got your super rich athletes that are making a ton of money, but most of your athletes, especially in soccer and lower league soccer, they are not making a professional wage in the sense that this is your one job and you can support yourself on this job. And while we have players that are making, quite a few players that are making six-figure salaries, somewhere in the six-figure range in the USL on the men's side, there are way more players that are making under, and some well under, $50,000 per year, and not maybe having health care. Like, you can't live. I don't know where in the country you can live off a salary like that. And especially in an environment in a sport where you don't know, like, you could get injured, something else can happen. It's not, I mean, we'll take my career job as an educator, and I was a teacher. And once you get in, you're you're I don't want to say fairly safe. I don't want to promote the myth that you can't fire teachers, because it really is not difficult to fire a teacher even with tenure and things like that. But but there's a need, and you're probably going to be there, and you have a sense of job security, but those things are there because of the union. And if you look in private school
Mhm.
situations, a lot of them that don't have unions, especially, it's a very different environment. Um, and this is where the union really needs to step up for the Players Association and make sure that, like, the top end will always work itself out. You got to focus on the bottom end. You got to make sure everyone is taken care of at a minimum level. To me, that is the primary job of the union, is to make sure that happens, not make sure your top 1% are taken care of.
To quote one of the few people who have given me hope in the last few years, it's time to reject the frigidity of individualism and embrace the warmth of collectivism. Um, I do feel unions are on the rise in the United States, or at least a appetite for them, which is good, just broadly speaking. But yeah, you're right, and it's actually funny because I think about American football, gridiron football. I knew a guy when I lived in Colorado. I knew a guy who was on the Denver Broncos practice squad, and honestly, I mean, he was a great guy. He was very smart. I'm sure he's doing totally, well for himself. But it was kind of a tragic story because he was a freak athlete. He was totally good enough to play somewhere professionally, right? But there wasn't really another option for him. He was, he
Right.
was graduated college, like he was done with college. So practice squad was really his only option. And if there had been like a second division NFL, even if it was like MLB style, MILB kind of minor league,
Right.
like at least he's playing professionally, and I understand it's kind of a weird thing to like jump to the NFL here, but I always think about him when I have these kind of conversations with people. And I do think the average American is a little more well versed in the NFL anyway. So it's kind of, a good connection to make. But what about the athletes who don't quite make the cut? Like, why do they not deserve to also make a living doing this? Because we'll go to the game, like people will go to the games. I'll go to the games. People will pay money to go to these games, assuming they're reasonably priced, which is another conversation. But it's just a shame how many people end up getting cut out. And I'm sure there's people unlike this guy who didn't have a college degree, who weren't as, I'm not as sure would be doing fine, without somewhere to go professionally. So yeah, it's people have this tendency to only think about what's at the top. Um, and I get that because people want to watch the best of the best, yada yada, whatever. But the vast majority of people are not in the 0.01%. It's funny how that works, but that's just math. Um, And so I don't know. I like don't get me wrong, I'll defend athletes making huge amounts of money because in my mind, like, duh, they're the ones earning it. Why should they not be reaping the benefits of that? If you can object to the amount of money in sports, like full stop, and I would agree with you on that. But if there's going to be that amount of money in sports, it should be going to the athletes, in my opinion. But that again, not really the conversation. But yeah, I think that American sports, one of the fundamental miscalculations is the underestimation of how much people would love to watch a local team, regardless. Like, people want to get behind something, right? And this kind of circles back
Right.
to the whole NWSL commissioner misunderstanding the problem. People want to connect to something, especially in this day and age where everything feels super fake,
Right.
online, AI. Like, people want an authentic connection to something. And I actually, this maybe will provide you a good segue into something I would like to talk about. Um, but something like AC Boise just getting started. Like, people want an authentic connection to something. And I have no doubt that club will be successful because guess what? They've taken the time to build an authentic brand identity that feels authentic to the city of Boise. And I'm really excited for them. And, broader speaking, I just think that American sports underestimates how powerful that can be.
I agree. And I think that's what some of the in this country top level professional sports are missing. So let's do this segue and do one last thing on the USL. A good news story, at least probably for people here in San Diego, and especially anyone who followed the Loyal when they were here. And you just mentioned AC Boise, and they've done a great job connecting the community. We've talked about it on the podcast before, how much it feels a little bit like when the Loyal started. They've had a huge, you know, influx of season tickets. They hired Nate Miller, which of course, San Diego Loyal connection. And they just signed their first player. And did you see who that was?
I did. So that's why I wanted to give you that segue.
Yeah,
Yeah, Blake Bodley is their
Blake
first player.
Bodley.
He's from Eagle, Idaho, which I think is like a suburb of Boise. So, yeah, he is effectively a local Boise guy, and I love that for them. I have a reliable source on this so I've known this was coming for a month or two. And there's
Okay.
actually two more former loyal players that I have also from this reliable source who told me about Blake. Will be joining Nate.
That
People
that
who have
would
worked
not
with him.
surprise me.
Yeah,
With
not at all.
Nate Miller
Um,
looking for players he's
right.
comfortable with.
Especially in the USL where a lot of it just kind of works on who you know and who you've worked with before, just because it is that more hyper localized thing. But anyway, I love Blake Bodley. He was one of my very favorite players in that last season, and I'm a little bit bummed that the incredible season he had was totally overshadowed by the fact that the club was folding. And I know that that's like
Yeah.
a silly thing to be bummed about, because the club was folding, and I still haven't really gotten over that. But Blake Bodley, I remember. This is going, a little deep on the lore for those of us that were in the space, but I remember John Morrissey, USL Tactics, putting out a chart towards the end of that 2023 season. This was after we already knew the club was folding, and it was chance creation and assists for all USL players, and the only fullback or wingback or whatever on that list, and he was near the top, but the only fullback on that list was Blake Bodley. And I always remember, like, damn, that he had such a quietly excellent season. He was so much fun to watch. And especially in that Nate Miller system that gave him that freedom to bomb up the left, which you could tell is
Yeah.
what he loved to do. He was a really fun player and such a good dude. I have to say the mullet he's rocking in the press release is a little bit questionable. But other than that, great move. He's headed back home. I'm sure he's excited about that. I've only been to Boise once, but I loved it. I thought it was an awesome, kind of little city, mid-sized city. I don't know how they'd identify. I don't want to offend any of my Boiseites, but I have a couple friends who actually moved there recently too. So shit, maybe I'll find myself getting up there. But yeah,
Get up there
they're
for
an
a
exciting
match.
club, and that's an exciting signing for sure.
Yeah, it was nice to see in the press release Nate Miller mentioned that was the guy they had target on really as primary signing that Nate Miller wanted. Now, Don't know how much of that might be just PR speak, for saying so for your first signing, but knowing Nate Miller
Yeah.
and what happened with the Loyal and the way the Loyal was built, especially when they actively looked for San Diegans that could come back and be part of the team that maybe had played somewhere else, Guido, Corona, like all these players, and trying to get them, into into the Loyal if they were able to get that chance. I doesn't surprise me at all to hear that Nate Miller said that about getting Blake Bodily, and probably, as you said, a couple other people in line, to really connect with the local community and build a team. And I will say it this way, I think the right way in trying to strongly connect with your community, and not, as some commissioners say, get them hooked on gambling apps. get get them get them in the stadium, watching the game, having fun, but having that communal experience. That is what is so great about the sport of soccer compared to most American sports. Um, anyway, it's just, I love to see it, and I'm gonna give you a chance to jump in if you have any last
Well,
comments before we
I
get
mean,
to our main topic here.
yeah, I was just gonna say, on top of what a good guy in the community he was, and the fact that he and Nate Miller have obviously worked together before. That one season he had in San Diego that I was referring to, where he was a statistical outlier in the most positive way, was the only season for San Diego Loyal where Nate Miller was actually effectively the head, or officially the head coach. Excuse me. I know he was
Right,
effectively the head coach for like the whole
right,
time.
yeah,
I don't get me wrong, nothing against Landon, but I think he will be the first to tell you he's not cut out for the head coaching role. I think he sees himself as more of a front office type person. But anyway, I digress. That was the one season Nate was officially the head coach. Was that season where Blake Bodily was arguably the most productive wide player in the league,
yeah.
as a fullback. So I fully expect that was an exciting reunion for both of them. I don't think, like, to your point, that would be obviously good PR fluff, but I don't think it was, because it makes sense from a culture, a tactical, a sporting standpoint.
Yeah, and I think this story really helps get us to our main topic, which is the San Diego Soccer History Society. Um, and we'll talk about what that is, but this importance also, I think, for us here in San Diego, we both think very fondly of the Loyal, and you know want to make sure that we help preserve that history, right? And some of the stuff we did in season one with this podcast of going deep into the archives to look up, um, the original San Diego Soccer Football League and some of the teams that were there with the San Diego team and the Foster team from out, by kind of like this Santee Lakeside area. Um, and then the Nomad team that was there, and some of the things we talk about later with the Coronado team. Um, but I think, we found from our listeners that those historical pieces, especially in San Diego, were some of our most enjoyed, or at least most talked about and communicated with us. And during this 2-week break that we had between season one and season two, I did a lot of thinking about how best to move forward and especially incorporate some more history. And one of the things in looking at soccer shorts and the way it's structured, because that's one of the things that was important to me about soccer shorts when I started, was to try to capture what was going on in the city, in this moment. Go out and find these stories and tell them, and to put them down in video form, also to preserve them in history so people didn't forget about them. I had someone send me a note sometime over the winter break, again, how they had gone back to watch the Forever Loyal series again, just to, go back. Something happened, it reminded them, and they went back and watched a couple of the episodes. And, that along with the other episodes we did, it was important to me to capture that so people don't forget, or the story doesn't change or evolve over time, that we captured it in the moment. But in trying to figure out how to do some of this more with soccer shorts moving forward, One of the things that I thought about, I wanted to try to do when I thought about this over the break we had, was how to include more people to help, how to include more people, whether it was with donations helping out or actually helping with their time or volunteering their services. And looking at the way soccer shorts in itself is structured, I don't think it really lends itself to a big team kind of effort. So one of the things I've penciled out is to start up this new San Diego Soccer History Society. And what it will hopefully be, if we get enough people interested in helping see this move forward, is a new nonprofit member-driven society, like we have the Zoological Society, or you're part of a museum group or something, and it will focus on researching and documenting, preserving, and most importantly, sharing San Diego's rich soccer history. So we're kind of going to this year somehow make this transition from soccer shorts to the San Diego Soccer History Society. And that way we can get more of the community involved and really community owned, because it really should be. It shouldn't funnel and go through one particular person. So before we get into some of the things we want to try to do with the San Diego Soccer History Society, Dylan, I'm going to let you jump in with any questions or comments here.
Well, I think it's good that you're doing this, or that we're doing this, or will be doing this, I guess. Sorry, my cat is sitting on my lap and both biting me and trying to snuggle me at the same time. So I'm having a little bit of a hard time. But I think I kind of said before we signed off for the year last year, there are things we've talked about on this podcast, and I'm not saying this to blow smoke up our asses, but I think it's true, that are not documented really, other than in these like newspaper archives that you've dug through. And realistically, that's not a widely publicly available resource. You need a subscription to the SDUT for their archives, and that's a newspaper not a lot of people are subscribing to these days, because let's be honest, they're a hollow shell of what they once were, owned by private equity. Again, that's a whole other conversation. But so it's kind of a public service in a way. And again, not trying to blow smoke up our asses, but it is to catalog all these things, to do the work of finding it and putting it into an accessible place where people who might be interested in it can find it. Because that's half the battle sometimes. I work in disability services in my day job, and this is something we talk about a lot. Like, sometimes you don't realize it, but you're not even reaching to the people you need to reach because you're not
on their radar.
Right. You're not communicating in the ways they communicate or are receiving or whatever. So it's an important part of it. And so I'm glad you're formalizing this, because I think it's an important part of San Diego history, especially when you consider the larger San Diego, Tijuana metropolitan area, which I think a lot of people in the current American government would like to pretend is not a thing, but is very much a thing, because borders are made up arbitrary lines on a map, but culture transcends those made up lines. And so the soccer culture has been here, but the cataloging of it has been lacking. So, again, for the last time I'll caveat, not trying to blow smoke up our asses here, but I think it's a really important thing that's getting done, and I'm glad you're formalizing it.
Yeah, so I don't know what that will mean specifically in the long term for this podcast, because we'll probably then start moving the history stuff out or reformulate this podcast. I don't know, but we need to get that stuff up and going, which is going to take some time. So in the short term, nothing's going to happen here directly, but as we start moving forward and get this Soccer History Society off the ground, we will, once it officially gets going, because we got to, organize and incorporate as a nonprofit and start getting things, together for that. Like I said, will take a little time, but once that gets going, I imagine we'll probably have a podcast somewhat like this one, focus a little more on, the San Diego soccer history specifically. There's probably going to be some other polished, what I envision is some other polished audio podcasts that can be put together, multiple series thing about a very particular issue. Some video ones as well to go back and tell the story, especially when we talk about the original San Diego Soccer Football League, which takes some time and skills to put together. So I'd like to get more of a team of people on these to help put them together if we can find those people who are interested. I'd like to do, envision to see some in-person events. I mean, really, there are a whole bunch of things we could do if we get this moving forward, to the point even of doing our own San Diego Soccer Hall of Fame, even if it's all digital right now. I mean, if you look at US soccer, I mean, they have stuff at that museum in Frisco at the stadium there for Dallas, but a lot of their stuff is also online. A lot of their stuff's just boxed up somewhere. So would like to figure out how we can, again, preserve our history, research it and find out and make sure we document it properly, preserve it, and share it. So we're looking for ways and ideas to do that. Again, envision a website that could act like a digital interactive space, so we could have some interactive pieces to go with that. Again, this won't all start, in 2026, but over time as we're looking to grow this out. And who knows, maybe if we're able to do this and get it set up properly as a 501c3 and have a proper board and get, decent donations, we may someday even be able to have a physical space for this that we can really then help preserve our San Diego soccer history. I mean, Dylan, I know we've met people, I think of someone like Cowboy, right, who has all these pins and other things and shirts, and all these other people who have saved some of their shirts or scarves or stuff from teams way back when. It really would be nice, even if it's just photographs of some of these things for now, but start preserving some of these and having a way that hopefully maybe someday we could display or put on some kind of displays with these. So those are, some of the vision of things we want to try to do. I mean, one of the things I thought would be great is take our this day in San Diego soccer history, and whether that just becomes its own very short little podcast audio piece, just a few minutes long, like, hey, this happened on this day, and do it again, maybe weekly. But I thought a fun thing might be to do if you did an event and do like a pub quiz night, but do it specifically on San Diego soccer history, right? So we could do some things and, have some meetups, get people together, raise money for the stuff we're doing as the nonprofit, so we can reinvest that and do more research and put things together for
I think
the benefit of everyone.
Yeah, if you advertised in the right way and approached it with the right partner, like the right host, I think that could be a super successful fundraiser type deal. Let's discuss this more when we're not live on air, but I have some connections to some like bars in North Park, like, Fair Play, Working Class, who do trivia anyway.
Right.
I wonder if they might be open to something like that. So let's talk.
Yeah, and for all our listeners out here, I mean, here's how you can help. The big thing is just, for right now, spread the word to as many people as possible about the San Diego Soccer History Society, so we can start getting some people together who are interested in preserving our soccer culture here in San Diego. And one of the first things that, as soon as I get a chance, hopefully I can have some more information by next episode, but want to get a Discord up and running soon, just so people who are interested can start being part of these conversations. We can throw some ideas around and start figuring out what we need to do to put things together. I've started the very kernels of a business plan, but really right now it's just spreading the word around to people. And at some point, eventually, after we incorporate, we'll do kind of KPBS style memberships and give people the opportunity to donate financially if that is within their ability, but also to volunteer and help put things together. One of the other things I thought about this more than a year ago, but I wasn't sure how to implement it. But this seems like a great possibility. Is we do want to make sure we record some things, and short of doing our own website and interactive pieces, I think one of the best things we could do is start getting a team of volunteers together just to start making sure like Wikipedia pages are correctly updated with the right information. That's something simple we can just initially start doing as we're starting to get the ball roll on other things. So we can just right we're make sure we're taking care of our own soccer history and having it in a place that's easily accessible to people as we start working on the other elements of this to do some more, I'll call it maybe a polished Ken Burns kind of piece, that we can put together and have a nice supplemental piece on the website where we do a deep dive into something. I had always put this out here, and this is something I would like to do under this umbrella. Is I always had in my mind to do a like on the 10-year anniversary, so in 2030, do kind of a recap of the San Diego Loyal, just like the 4 years of what the San Diego Loyal, along with the supporter group and everything else. That's only 4 years away. But this could be a nice piece that falls under this umbrella that then, because we're doing it under a nonprofit, would allow a lot more people to be involved and be able to, again, because this stuff costs money, be able to effectively collect donations and things to be able to get these things off the ground and actually make them happen and preserve that history, even though this is really recent history. But we want to make sure we capture even these kinds of things. 1904, that whole team and organization should be captured, right? These are just recent things and clubs that we've missed. But I'll go back on the women's side, the Spirit, the Sea Lions, like other teams that we've had. So while people are still alive and still have good, strong memories of these clubs and these teams, and they were involved with them, we can start capturing and recording and putting things together so they are saved for generations to come, and at the same time still do research on some of the old historical stuff that has been lost and put together. I mean, I already have an interesting piece that I'm not going to give away now that I have already penciled in for a particular date in November, that I think will surprise some people in terms of a connection to San Diego soccer history. But we're already starting to put some pieces together for some of our things, that, whether we do them on this podcast or we do them as this changes. I just really, to me, it's important to make sure we preserve whatever we can and have it in good shape for future generations. And I think there's a lot of people who would be willing to help, either time or money, whatever, to put them together. And like I said, we can maybe even do our own Hall of Fame at some point, start identifying key people from the San Diego area and do an awards ceremony, some kind of function, an event. But anyway, lots of potential things on the line that could happen down the road. Right now, we just need to start getting people together who are interested in having the conversations about how best to move forward with this.
Yeah, I really love that. I think too, if your plan is to do a kind of a retrospective at the end of the decade, start doing the interviews now.
Well, that's what I mean. It's
Yeah.
like we're already in a spot where, like, I start thinking ahead, like, yeah, it's not a time crunch, but if we don't start getting moving on some of those pieces, it certainly won't happen in terms of a 10-year kind of anniversary.
I think too, if you're, San Diego Loyal is, as much as I hate to say it, it's a closed chapter. So
Right.
you should start gathering the stories now, because new stories aren't being written, but old stories will be lost to time, right?
And people forget about things.
And those of us myself included, who are, very salty and made bitter by the sporting world, um, will grow hardened within our shells by 2030. So you got to get to those nuts before they're too hard to crack.
Right. All right. Well, that was the big kind of the push and the action for helping. Like I said, our call to action is spread the word as much as possible about the San Diego Soccer History Society, and first step should be a Discord, and hopefully by our next podcast I'll have information about that, and we'll start getting people at least in a place where they can share ideas and start talking. Then we can talk about meetups, and I'll start sharing some of the things I have, and we can figure out what to do about really formalizing this into a proper 501c3 with a proper board, and get it off the ground, hopefully this year. I would love to have it up and off the ground before the World Cup comes around to then help use that as leverage to promote. That might be a little ambitious, but depending how many people we have involved that want to have those conversations, that it's certainly doable. So we'll see what we can put together.
Yeah, absolutely. The paperwork itself is not that difficult. I know it takes a while.
Yeah, I've done
the bureaucracy of government is what it is, but yeah,
I mean, could we do it? Like, yeah, I mean, I could totally, since I've done something like this before, I could totally do the paperwork and have it all done and set up, at least from a California perspective, by next week. But that doesn't get you really properly set up to move forward and function as a legitimate 501c3, and really put the things in place you need to be successful moving forward. It would kind of be just, well, I did it, I set it up, and now you're kind of in the same boat of scrambling to figure out how you want to move forward. So rather take the time and get people together who want to discuss and give input, and then move forward when we're ready to do a more effective launch.
Yeah, sounds great. I mean, we discussed it a little bit before the show, but this is all still pretty much news to me. So I'm digesting how I think I could best contribute. But I'm looking forward to it. I think it will be good to have something passion project or passion project adjacent to sink my teeth into this year for no reason, apropos of nothing.
Yeah, and then I hope there's other people who feel that way as well, so we can get at least a small team of people to start having those conversations. But I've already been starting to reach out to some others who might be willing to help us, or at least have some connections for, especially when we're talking in terms of a board, might be able to put us in contact with some people who would be good to help out. So we'll have to do it. Maybe even though it's not terribly soccer related, maybe our first one have to be an ode to Bum.
Yeah, well, Bum is still
off.
Floating around the San Diego soccer circles amongst the locals.
Right.
So, Bum will live on, as great as perfect a mascot as I thought he was. Bum existed before the locals, and Bum will exist after the locals.
Yes. All right, Dylan. Well, I think that wraps up another episode for us. First episode of season 2 for the LGS Pod. And again, we will keep this format and keep going every week until we get some better clarification on the San Diego Soccer History Society. And then we'll figure out how we'll shift gears. But until then, we'll keep going on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. if you want to join us live. And feel free to come and join us in the chat, or send us any of your questions and comments online. You can do it if you're watching here on YouTube, and even if it's after the fact, you can leave a comment there on the channel page, or on the video page. You can contact us via Blue Sky at soccershorts.bigpinedigital.com. Again, until we get profiles and stuff set up for the San Diego Soccer History Society. And also, if you're listening to us on a podcast and not here on YouTube, in the description at the very top, you should see a link that says send us a text. So please, if you're interested in helping, if you have any ideas about how to move forward with the San Diego Soccer History Society or have any good contacts, please drop us a note, let us know, so we can start building this together as a community. All right, Dylan, any last comments before we head out for this week?
Yeah, sure. Two things. First of all, AFCON, the African Cup of Nations, has been going on, and it's been very exciting. It's mostly been broadcast on beIN Sport, which
Yes.
I don't know, has a very like minor presence in the United States. I don't know. I don't have access to them, so I've had to go to other means to watch my games. But it's been a very exciting tournament, and I believe that this is the last time the tournament will be held biennially, as in every other year. I think going forward, it's going to be every 4 years, because I believe the original idea behind the biennial schedule was because not a lot of African teams generally qualified for the World Cup. So this gave them something else to kind of, focus on. But now the way, and we talked about this, season 1, go back and listen, the way the new slots in this expanded World Cup have been allocated to sort of level the landscape. I think with that in mind, the AFCON is going to go to a 4-year format. We can maybe come back and correct me next episode if I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure I read that. So in a weird way, this is kind of the end of a chapter for AFCON, which has always been a super exciting tournament. But the final 8, the quarterfinals, is like all the big hitters in Africa. So it's going to be an exciting, final 8. So tune in if you can. That was the first thing. Second thing I wanted to say, it's always been my little subheader thing, rematch. Come find me if you play the game. If you're a gamer and you haven't played it and you like soccer, rematch. It's at the best stage, like best it's ever been in terms of development. The developers have worked out a lot of the kinks, and it's the best football game that's ever been released, in my opinion. And I will die on that hill, and it's only been out for like 6 months, and it's only getting better. So come find me if you're a gamer. DWill27 on rematch.
Well, maybe we need to do a tournament at some point. Maybe something to think about here.
Yeah, I've got a couple
2026.
friends who I've squatted up with, so maybe we can work something out.
All right, sounds good. All right, Dylan, I guess that wraps everything up. And for everyone else, thank you for joining us here on our first episode of season 2. And again, please spread the word about the San Diego Soccer History Society. Other than that, we'll see everyone again next week. Good night.